All right. Hey, folks. Hope you're all enjoying your summer so far. This is the Rocker Dog Podcast, the only show under the sun that talks to musicians about their profound relationships with their dogs. I'm your host, Tim Dill, and my obligatory shout-out goes to my dog, Charlie. And today our tags are wagging happily in welcoming bassist Kurtis Keber to the show. For the last 7 years, Kurtis' primary gig has been with Grace Potter, and this fall he'll be holding down the low end for Ellie and AJ's Silver Delivery Tour. And this is his energetic and task-oriented rocker dog.
We are speaking about my German Shepherd Husky mix, Zula. And by all of her behaviors, mannerisms, energy level, it's like a true 50-50 split. So
What do you explain to me that split? Like, what do you see that's German Shepherd and what do you see that's Husky?
well, as a puppy, every puppy has the energy levels, like just energy through the roof. And with her, we noticed early on to kind of keep her brain balanced, she just needed to run. That's just what she needed as a husky. So we used to we still do it to this day, but I would get on my rollerblades and we would just go down to the beach on the boardwalk and she would just pull and run. And that was like the best energy release because that husky side of her was getting that fixation of just running.
Mm-hmm.
And then once that was out of her system, more or less, when she was like, hey, I'm fulfilled, then we just noticed the attention of the German Shepherd would kick in, and very focused and task oriented.
Right.
I need a task to do this. So it was like fulfilling both breeds, if you will.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So
How old?
she's 7. She will be 7 in August. Yeah.
Okay. And taking me back 7 years, what was going on in your life, in your career that said, we need to put a dog in the middle of this?
Well, when my wife and I have always been dog lovers. I grew up with dogs, and my ex-girlfriend and we had a black German Shepherd and a Ridgeback. And then when I moved to LA, I didn't want to be selfish, and I was touring a lot, and it just wasn't the right time to have a dog. And then when I met my wife, it was like right out the gate, we're gonna have a dog one day. We just have to kind of feel like it's right. We don't want to be selfish about it. And you just never know when that time is gonna come. But one day while my wife was at work, she just sends me this photo of a 9-month-old dog. And one of her and it was Zula. One of her coworkers works at the time worked with Hollywood Huskies, which was a rescue shelter. She would just take on some dogs, foster them, bring her into her pack, because I think she had at the time maybe 5 dogs in her house.
Wow.
And she would just kind of foster, help them, get used to pack mentality and behaviors and just kind of structure, if you will. And so when my wife sent me that photo, she goes, this is Zula, and she's with Molly right now. She's available, and we should meet her sometime. So we ended up setting up a little hike with Molly, and we just did a hike with Zula with Molly's dogs. And I was done. I just loved this dog so much. It was just right away, just establishing that connection with her on that hike, and just seeing Zula. I don't know what it was, man. I just fell in love right away. We both just kind of bonded, all 3 of us, And so we just agreed to Molly, we'll take her in for 2 weeks and see how it goes. And we knew it. We weren't going to give her back. So yeah, it was just certain things in her life just lined up where it felt right to bring her in. And she was 9 months when she came into our life. So
okay, so she's pretty much full size by then.
She, I think, was almost full size. I think she was 55 pounds. at that point, and now she's like she's like 75-pound dog.
Okay.
So yeah,
And you had mentioned you had a shepherd before and a ridgeback. Was that Bubba and Coco?
that's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you had experience with the shepherd.
Yep. Hmm.
Going back to your history and childhood, what kind of dogs were you raised with?
Two Cocker Spaniels actually that
Okay.
we had growing up, Marty and Murphy, and I know, right? Just it's like perfect
It says it
names.
all.
It really does, yeah. And Murphy was like the Murphy, just like goofball, and then Marty was like the more kind of stoic one, still goofball. But my dad was raised with German Shepherds, so but by the time I came into the fold, my grandfather's shepherds had passed and
Hmm.
they didn't have any dogs. But, my dad would tell me, just little things about shepherds to kind of be aware of. And um, when we had Coco, my ex-girlfriend, you just learn so much about the breed. They show you what they need,
Right. Right.
and it's just kind of just knowing that like they need structure, you know.
Hmm.
They like you can't let them be king of the house. So
Yeah. What? So is Bubba the ridgeback?
yeah. Hmm.
Tell me a little bit about that breed. I've always liked the ridgeback, but I've never had hands-on experience with one. What are they like?
I mean, amazing dogs, lots of energy. Like
Right.
Bubba, I don't know if it's like a characteristic of Ridgebacks. I'm pretty sure it is, but Bubba he was a very energetic dog. And at the time, I think I was like 21 or 22,
Hmm.
when we had him. So of course, like
You can
I
match his
was,
energy.
yeah, totally. And I was like still learning too. So like by the time we adopted Zula, it was like, you know, things I've learned along the way that Kelly and I we just like have a lot of really well balanced structure in Zula's life, where as like back then maybe not so much, but yeah, 100% we could totally match his energy
Yeah.
way back when.
Well, you mentioned Zula's behaviors, and I want to ask, she appears very well trained. Did you guys train her
Thank you.
yourselves?
We did. Yeah. Yeah, we did. That's I always like to tell folks that every day is a training day.
Right.
It never stops. But I think with Zula, we both understood, the German Shepherd's needs, the Husky's needs. And it's like when you have a tired dog, you have a happy dog,
Yeah.
and then you can kind of start that training training process. Like and boundaries too is like a big thing shepherds thrive on.
And was that knowledge just from a lifetime being around dogs, or was there a point that you picked up a book or did a YouTube video?
For me personally, it was experience,
Yeah.
growing
Yep.
up with dogs, having like I learned a lot about the shepherd breed firsthand with Coco, obviously. That was a huge part of it. And then also my dad telling me things about shepherds. Even my grandpa, when he was alive and I was telling him about Coco, he would tell me little things here and there, but I didn't really I didn't really apply all that stuff in like a mature, thoughtful way until we adopted Zula,
Right.
because I was in my early 20s with Bubba and Coco, and I was a kid with the Cocker Spaniels, and I just knew I just always loved dogs, but how to apply all that stuff, it kind of came together with Zula, if
Yeah.
you will. So
Okay.
yeah,
I,
hope
I need
that
to learn.
hope
It's
that
funny.
makes
It does. It makes perfect sense. But it's funny
yeah.
the longer you go on, the more I'm like, I'm a terrible dog owner because I'm,
Oh no no
as,
no.
as someone who hosts a podcast about dogs, I'm the worst when it comes to like disciplining my dog. And he went through professional training, and just by the fact you're like they need to learn every day. It's like every day I'm a pushover for a different reason every day with my dog.
Dude, I'm a pushover too, like we both are.
Well, there's just a couple of posts I want to pick out and ask you about. One was back in 2018. It was Christmas morning. You're in Charlottesville and you're volunteering at the animal shelter.
Yeah, yeah.
why were you in Virginia, and what were the circumstances of being there on Christmas?
My wife is from Charlottesville,
Okay,
Virginia.
right.
That's where we got married, and that town is incredible. So we love going back there, and we went back for Christmas that year. And her Aunt Karen, Kelly's aunt, was like, "How about we all, instead of like doing a typical Christmas morning, how about we all go to the SBCA and we just volunteer?" And like without like a doubt, like everyone was like, "Yes, of
Yeah,
course." Like, why wouldn't we?
yeah,
So, and that's what we did. That's how we spent our Christmas morning. And to this day, it was one of my favorites. It was,
that's great.
yeah,
That's
it was
great.
awesome.
It's
So,
good to hear. Good way to
yeah,
spread goodwill at that time of year.
yeah, I totally recommend that for anybody actually. Like, because Christmas, at the every SPCA, everyone wants to be with their family who work there, and Christmas mornings is like that's the time where they really could use some help.
Yeah,
um, and it made an impact. Like, I think there was only a couple employees working that day because that SPCA is pretty good size operation. Yeah, and we definitely made a difference. I think that
yeah, for
dog in
sure.
the photo, Betty was that dog's name, I think. I can't remember. It was a cute little pit bull, and she just like roamed the lobby. That was like her place, and so cute. No,
Yeah, that's
anyways.
great. That's great of you to
Hmm.
do. So the second post goes back to 2013, so 12 years. Yeah. Shasta the studio dog. Does that ring a bell?
Oh, of course it does, man.
Okay, studio dogs have
Absolutely.
become a big focus of the show. What is about the studio dog that everyone gravitates towards?
Even
Yeah,
when you're on tour and like the local production manager like has their dog at the venue, it's the best.
yeah, yeah.
So, but but Shasta, um, it's funny. So I was in a band with Cassidy Freeman, who is now like she's on that show Righteous Gemstones. She plays Danny McBride's wife, Amber, on the
Okay,
show. And I was in a band with her back then, and at that time, Cassidy was on. She now lives in Santa Fe, but she this was before she was living in Santa Fe, and she was filming. I think it was Longmire was the show that she was
all right,
on,
okay. I know.
and Shasta was her dog.
Okay,
And so there was like a week where she was out there filming, but everyone in the band was like, let's go out to Santa Fe because where Cassidy was staying, there was like a little guest house. And so we're like, let's just bring a studio out there. And for a week, let's just make an album. And that's what we did. And so Shasta was the studio dog, even though it was Cassidy's dog, she was just, bopping around in and out, just being a dog and just the best. I
that's
like,
great.
yeah, to this day, I remember that. Like, that was one of the most like fun experiences I had making an album just because the circumstances, everything was very memorable.
Yeah, it sounds
Shasta was
great.
a Shasta was a sweetheart. So
Sounds very
yeah,
spontaneous.
yeah, totally.
Yeah,
With
I
like
guess.
thoughtful planning, you know what I
Yeah,
mean? But it was
yeah,
spontaneous. So,
yeah.
but yeah.
That's great. Well, before I end the show to the Zoomies are five fast, frivolous questions. I want to ask, do you have a go-to story for any of your dogs? Whether it's a disaster or a funny story or a medical story, does anything come to mind? Like you have something you're like, I know exactly what I'm going to say.
There's tons of them, but on the positive side, because there's always like the really positive stories that you have with your dog, and then there's always like the other side where it's like the stories that freak you out. And as
Yeah.
a dog parent, you're like, oh my God, but like the positive stories are just like anytime we're outside with Zula, like she loves the snow. You brought that up. And the
Hmm.
photos I have with her in the snow, like whenever it snows, we have to go, we have to go to the snow so
Yeah.
she can just fulfill. But then the other story, like the scary story, was I was renovating our kitchen when we lived in Inglewood, and I did all the renovations myself. And I remember on day one of the renovation, Zula just like came over, and those big nostrils, strong scent. And she just like came over and was just like sniffing and checking it out. And then like all of a sudden she just started kind of doing like this reverse hiccup, like, that like kind of reverse sneeze that dogs do, and I just kind of started freaking out. I was like, oh my gosh, she like accidentally inhaled a brad nail or something,
Right.
and she was just starting to pace. I could see her starting to get anxious. And so we like went outside, see if that would clear it up if she had to go to the bathroom or something. And it did nothing. So my wife and I were like, let's take her to the emergency room. So, or the emergency vet. So we took her there and we just had them do x-rays on everything, Yeah. It just like, yeah, ended up being an insane amount of money. And
I can imagine.
they found nothing. There was nothing in there. And they said, yeah, she probably just like inhaled some dust, you know.
Yeah.
We're like, do the throat, do the stomach, do everything. Because I thought like for sure there was like a little brad nail or like a piece of
Yeah.
metal that she inhaled. And we just look back on it now and laugh. Like, of course, it's the first day we start renovating the kitchen, That was just one of those instances where in the moment, it was
Yeah.
terrifying. It
Yeah.
was terrifying. So,
All right. Well, let's hit the zoomies. The first question is, do you let Zula lick your face?
she doesn't really go after your face to like lick. She
Okay.
comes up and like boops you,
Okay.
like she'll just come up and like boop your face. But if she licks you, she'll just do like one good lick. But yeah, of course, absolutely.
Okay.
So,
But you have no, I mean, and you go back to Bubba and Coco, you've got no issues with dogs licking your face or germs or
man, I don't. No.
good. Okay.
Yeah, I don't. I definitely am like, okay, bring it on,
Yeah. Have
So,
at it.
yeah.
Okay. Question two is, does Zula have a theme song? What would her walk-up music to the plate be?
I feel like at times, because she's a goofball like a husky, it could be like Curb Your Enthusiasm,
Nice.
but
Yeah.
but then when she's like in like activity mode and doing the thing, it could be like Eye of the Tiger, something
Yeah.
like that. You
Yeah.
know what I mean?
Yeah.
So,
Sounds
but yeah,
fitting.
yeah.
Okay. I know she doesn't tour with you, obviously, but let's put her on the tour bus and backstage. And what would she insist be on the tour rider for her?
Oh, hockey stick and a ball for sure. Specifically the orange chucket balls. She loves those. Like gets her jaw fixation. She loves
Hmm.
it. Um, Definitely peanut butter and some type of bone, whether it be like a buffalo horn or one thing that what I did recently is like I go to this butcher shop and I just ask for the scraps. And they, for like $40, I can just get this huge box of all this scrap and offcuts, and we just keep it in the freezer. And that's like part of her meal. I just break off one of those and just give it to her, and she just is in her element.
I bet.
That's like you want to see a dog be a dog, just do that.
Yeah.
So I feel like she would have to have like frozen meat with
Okay.
some kind of bone on it on the rider.
I got to try that. I got to try the frozen meat. I've never done that. Okay, question four is, do you use a dog voice?
Yeah, definitely. Of course.
Okay, you want
Uh,
it, I won't put you up to using it, but can you describe it?
just kind of like a derpy voice. Hey Zula, hey
Right.
girl. My wife has this thing that she does with Zula. It's just like this, like it's kind of like I don't want to say it's a high pitched voice, but it's just like baby talk, if you will. It's just like
Yeah,
as
yeah.
dog owners, we all come up with our own weird things that we do with our dog, and it's just like so we have this one photo of Zula, and the title of the photo or on the Polaroid is Zubu in 22. And all of a sudden, Zubu turned into Boo Boo, and then it turned into Boo Boo Shoe. And then sometimes my wife will now call her Shod, like putting on the past tense of putting on a shoe. And so, like, sometimes we'll just call her Shoe, like we'll call Zula Shoe. So, like, it just weird things like kind of morph,
Yeah,
But I feel like every dog owner has that, like, kind of soft spoken, derpy, innocent voice with their dog. So,
yeah. For sure. And to your point, the nicknames. I got to work that
Yeah.
question in. The nicknames are great because it's funny how they do evolve to be nothing related to the original name.
Yeah.
All right. And question 5, is there a dog organization or dog service that you'd like to give a shout out to?
I mean, definitely Hollywood Huskies,
Okay.
for sure. They, I know what they're doing is amazing. Um, and given that Zula kind of came into our lives by way of them through Molly, um, they've definitely been an organization we've like paid attention to.
Hmm.
Um, but I definitely got to give a shout out to Molly Eulig, who Zula came from. She's going into like dog training full time, and she has a pretty good social media presence. Pete's Adventure Pack is what it is. And man, if you want, like, her temperament as a human being is just like, she's so good with dogs. Like, she is a dog whisperer. And I think her and her husband have 40 acres. And I think they're using that land as like part of their future of like training dogs, behavioral seminars, and activities with your dog, like mountain biking with your dog. So
Yeah.
I definitely learned, because I go mountain biking with Zula, I learned a lot of that from Molly. And she's just bringing a lot of fulfillment to the owners and the dogs' lives with what they're doing. So I'm so happy to hear and see that like Molly and her husband AJ are just like killing it with that business.
That's
So
great. That's great. Well,
yeah,
we'll definitely shout them out and get a little bit more information in our show notes. And
cool, cool.
well, Curtis, I'm glad we found each other, and
Me too, man.
thanks for coming on the show. I knew you'd be a good one.
Well, I appreciate it, man. Like, this is seriously all I want to talk about is like music and dogs. Like, there's nothing else like greater. Thank you
All
for
right.
having me, man. I
Hey,
really appreciate it.
my pleasure.
So,
My pleasure.
Carl, you're a damn good dog.